welcome to a little summary or wrap-up on the 2019 Grocery Getter Classic. If you're here, I'm going to start off by saying if you're here to see kind of footage of the Grocery Getter Classic, this is not going to be that kind of video. It's just going to be a wrap-up on my thoughts on how I felt the event went and just some of the observations I had from actually running my own car this year rather than just driving in it. So I'm going to be going into a lot of kind of mental quirks that I have and stuff like that and how the race affected it. So that's going to be the basics of it. So let's start off with what is Grocery Getter Classic for those of you that don't know. The Grocery Getter Classic is a 24-hour oval race held in Fort Wayne, Indiana. It's a 3/8 or half mile oval, paved oval. We ran 3/8 all the entire race this year. I think it's going to stay that way because half mile is just too fast. But the purpose of the whole thing is to be the very most basic, easy way to get into racing there is. Easier than lemons, easier than anything. It's pretty much the cheapest, easiest form of racing. There's very little safety restrictions. There's very little that you have to do to your car. The only thing that you really need is it has to be a stock car. Other than that, you don't have to do a roll cage. There's no need to relocate the fuel tank, all the stuff that is kind of intimidating for someone just getting into racing. You don't have to do that, and it makes it much more entry form of racing than anything else I've seen. So the specifics of this year. Last year I just drove in a car. I drove in a Honda Accord with friends from online racing, and it was the best time I've ever had on vacation. This year I decided I wanted to bring my own car, a fun car, and by happenstance I managed to acquire a Buick Roadmaster on eBay. That was found by ZK, one of the drivers in the Roadmaster, because he was really looking to find one, and he found that one, and I ended up bidding on it and winning it. And it was just convenient and easy because I like eBay in the fact that I don't have to interact with anyone. You don't have to call, you don't have to haggle. You see the price, you go to what you want. There's no communication. You win it, then you talk to the person, you figure out picking it up, all that, and it's a lot easier interaction-wise. It was a cakewalk to buy this car off of eBay. Whereas Craigslist is stressful for me because I'm not one for human interaction, so it was easy to do that. And normally what keeps you away from eBay is the fact that it's more expensive to buy off eBay, typically. But it's convenient. So I ended up with a Buick Roadmaster, which is an absolute boat of a vehicle. I believe, I don't know exact numbers, but I believe it's like 19 feet long and 4,500 pounds. It is huge. It has 3 rows of seats with the third row facing backwards, the rumble seats. And it's just cool. It's a really cool car. One in good condition would be a fun car to just drive. I got that from driving the Roadmaster, is I would really enjoy driving one of those just on a road trip. Oh my god, it's like it floats, it's comfortable, you're like sitting in a couch. It would be fantastic for long drives. And it was a cool car, but ridiculous. It fit the build of what I would like, which is a ridiculous car, something absolutely stupid. And whether it's stupid as in this car is never going to survive, it's not meant to race, it's not meant to live when you drive it normally, that kind of stuff, I like that. Or stupid in this car doesn't belong in a track, like any track, anywhere, which is what the Roadmaster fell into. It wasn't fast, it wasn't unreliable by any standpoint, it's a Chevy 350, but it was ridiculous in just sheer size and how it wallowed. It's just a funny sight. And to kind of add on that, and this is where we get into the mental quirks aspect of it, I decided, you know what, I should kind of do up the car. It's not quite ridiculous enough just being big. It's a boat. Why don't I make it a boat? And I talked with NCW, who is one of the other drivers on the main car that we ran from last year and this year, and because he does all kinds of cool liveries and stuff for our online racing, and he always does really cool art cars. So I asked him if he could make the Roadmaster look like a dazzled ship, which for those of you that don't know what that is, it's World War I era ships. They painted these graphics on the ships that are basically just random lines in all different directions, different sizes, and the purpose of it is that kind of variation makes it difficult when you're on the ocean to tell what you're looking at. You can't tell if you're looking at the front or back of the boat or anything. So it was a kind of quote-unquote camouflage, and I thought that would be really cool to make it look like one of those. And he came up with something, put it together, and sent it back to me, and we got in a voice chat, and we quickly realized that wasn't going to work because while the Roadmaster is very big, you would think you have a lot of real estate to paint with. It's very long and very narrow, with a lot of the space being taken up by windows. So there's not a whole lot to work with painting wise because all the windows have to come out for the race. So we got to talking with Cubes, which another one from our racing community that we talk with a lot. The three of us were talking, and I want to say it was Cubes that said just paint it like a warship, like a battleship, just the battleship gray, and that would look cool. So I quick threw together a artistic rendering of the Roadmaster as a battleship, and that seemed like a good idea at the time. It really did. It seemed like, okay, this is really cool. My God, did I underestimate the amount of work and effort that would go into making that happen, because of when I get something set in my mind, I have one way of seeing it. I want it that way. I can't vary. Like, if I want to do something a certain way, I have to do it that way. It's not, I have the vision in my head, I'm doing that. I had a similar feeling with this vehicle, with the Renegade. I was like, just the vision in my head was a red Jeep Renegade with the white Sparco rally wheels, and that vision, I had that as being just a really cool rally car. Look, and it really looked good. It's great. It works. It allows me to make really cool things. I have a good vision, and I'm driven to get that vision. However, that vision I had for the Roadmaster was ambitious. Between putting what I drew up, which I should have edited in a picture of my rendering, what I drew up had a tower, like a communication tower, like that would be attached on top of the bridge, so over top of where the command center is. And then I believe NCW suggested putting the funnel on it, or maybe that might have been cubes, so where the smoke would come out from the engines. And so I had that, all right, I want to do that. And me being me, I don't do, the way I always joke about it, I don't do half stupid. I only do full stupid. So I had it set in my mind, I'm making it out of steel. I don't care what it takes, it has to be made of steel. So I went and started searching for the biggest box or rectangular tubing I could find for the communications tower, which I wanted it to be, based on the images I found, I was guessing 8 inches wide would look about right on the Roadmaster. So what I found was, for that wide, the best you could do was a 1/4 inch wall. And for the height I was looking at, that would be about 50 to 60 pounds worth of steel. And I was, as much as like I said, I like to do full stupid, I was quite aware that 56 pounds was just way too much. I could do more, but I could not do 56 pounds before I added anything to it. And I was going to be doing cross bracing and a bunch of other stuff that's only going to add more weight. So I ended up settling on a 6-inch rectangular tubing, which I could get an 1/8 inch wall. And that allowed for me to knock the weight down once I was completely done. Everything on it, that all was attached to a 2 foot by 2 foot 1/8 inch steel plate. And all that together weighed a grand total of, I believe, 56 pounds, which, granted, is very heavy. However, it's lighter than if I went 8 inch wide, a lot lighter. And in my experience, between the 2 layers of roof and the 1/8 inch steel plate, it would take a hell of a lot of force to make it go through. So I ended up doing a lot of welding with that, and it ended up taking me a long time to throw that together, get the steel, and put it all together. And then by the time I finished that, it dawned on me, I still got to do the funnel, and I still have to service the car and do all these things. And it was like that moment, that project creep, like kind of hit me, and I realized how in over my head I was. And I had to work a solid about 3 weeks straight of about 2 to 3 hours a day on the Roadmaster, and just every night work on something for 2 or 3 hours, make some progress, or else I was never going to make it for the deadline. So I had to build the funnel, which I made out of a steel drum, scrap steel drum I got from work, and a scrap steel core for a foil core that we use at work. Cut those down to size, painted it up. That was not too bad. But then came the hard part. I went to start working on the Roadmaster, and I never really drove it much when after I bought it and everything. I just I took it around the block once, and that was it. I parked it. I noticed some brake seepage, and it didn't seem that bad. I was a little bit worried about, but it didn't seem that bad. I thought maybe it was just a loose fitting, something along that lines. Yeah, I was way off. What ended up happening is I replaced all of the brake lines for the front half of the car. That from every brake line from the front half forward was all replaced. And it wasn't easy because doing brakes sucks to begin with. It's no fun. Doing it on this GM piece of garbage was a nightmare because GM used 2 different sized brake lines throughout the vehicle. The very front was all 3/16, and then everything else besides that was 1/4 inch. And nowhere online did I read into that. Like, nowhere has, hey, the back half of this car is a completely different size brake line, just so you know. So I ordered a crap ton of 3/16, and I didn't have the right brake line. I didn't have the right fittings because they use bubble fittings, which no car uses besides like these GM. It's a very odd fitting that practically no one uses. Luckily, a double flare is good enough for using on a track car. It wasn't good, but it was good enough. But it was just every time I replaced a line and I would fix a section, I found a new line that was leaking. And before I knew it, I was a week straight on just doing brake lines. Nothing but brake lines for like a week. Just, I would fix one, next one was broken, fix that one, next one was broken. And then when I was bleeding the brakes, I ended up breaking one of the brake bleeders and having snapped the retrieval tool inside of that. So I completely botched that caliper and had to buy a new one. But all that kind of just was roadblocks. It was a lot of work, and it stresses me out. As a person, I struggle really badly with confidence in my work. I don't have a whole lot of self-esteem when it comes to things that I build. I'm never I get proud of things I do, but I'm never happy. I'm never happy with the work I do. I'm always afraid that I could have done better. I could have done something different. It's never good enough. Like, everything I do, I'm never satisfied with it. And that weighs a lot on me, especially for this race car. It was brutal for me because it was that nagging feeling that I'm not going to do something right and it's going to cause us to not be able to run the car and have a good time. It wasn't so much that I was going to fail at something for myself. It felt like I was going to let everyone down that was going to be driving the car besides me. It just felt like a burden that I was gonna kind of ruin the race for other people. And that made the whole process, every single setback, every single brake line I had to do, everything even though it's nothing, it wasn't a whole lot of work. I could do it. It wasn't too terrible. Most people who are mechanically savvy enough wouldn't bat an eyelash at most of the stuff I did. It's just easy and do it. But every single thing, it's a big deal to my brain, because it's one more thing that could go wrong when we go racing. That's what it is to me. It's not that I have something broken that I have to fix. It's, all right, now I have one more thing that I have to do that could go wrong. That's one more mode of failure that I could have. And that just gets stuck in my head of, oh, now there's a chance that this can go wrong. And it's really it was really straining on me, and really made me question whether bringing my own vehicle was the right decision. So with that, the whole process just really kind of drug me down and really wore me out. By the time it came to the race, I was really stressed and really pushing the boundaries of my kind of mental capabilities of what I can do, or what I can handle. Especially, I ended up painting it the weekend before having to leave for a week-long trip for work, and that took away a week of wrenching on the car, so it shortened my time frame on what I could do, and I had to leave the car partially finished with the brake work during that trip. So there was a lot going on at that time, and it was really kind of tough for me. And kind of looking back on it, it was, I don't know, it seems silly to me. And the more, when I think about it, it's silly that I get so stressed out about doing that kind of work, and I get so stressed about things going wrong. The whole purpose of that car was supposed to be, you have fun in it, you get in, you romp on it. If something goes wrong, who cares? You bodge it if you can, throw it back together if you can get it back on the road. If you can't, all right, the car's done. We still have our other car. We can still race. It wasn't intended to be like a competitive car, but it just, my brain just can't get past that. It's just one of the things I always fight with, and it just seems silly looking back on it. The other thing that kind of, I don't know, it bothered me when I left the race. So something bothered me when I left the race was that I felt like I failed in the purpose of the car. I felt like a failure leaving that race, which I know to the other drivers of the car especially, and I think to most of the people that know of the car and know how we did, which it went the full 24 hours. It did a pretty good job. It did far exceeded what we were expecting, but it felt like a failure to me. It really did, because like I said, the purpose of that car was supposed to be, you hop in it, you push that car as hard as you can, beat the ever-living crap out of it, and then let it die, and then we'll fix it and keep fixing it until we can't fix it anymore. That was going to be its purpose. And I think what happened was, in that first stint at the start of the race, what I was planning on doing, because I wanted to make sure everyone got to drive the car before I broke it, at least that was my plan, I was testing the car out, testing the waters, feeling it out, see what gear it likes, see where it seemed happy to run, those kind of things. And shortly into driving, maybe not even 10 minutes in, the temperature started climbing, and it did not want to drop. It climbed all the way to 210, and then to 220, and it just stayed there. It did not want to go, and I spent my entire time trying to figure out how to keep it from getting too hot. And I don't know if it's something to do with my prior history with overheating. That's kind of why in some of my social media pages you'll see overheating slacker. It's because I have a history with overheating. My first car overheated more times than I can count. It got to the point where when I would travel more than an hour, I would factor in how much time it would take me to let the car cool down, refill it with coolant, and then drive to my destination. I factored in me overheating into the destination time. And without fail, I would overheat. I would fill it back up after it cooled down, drive to my destination, get there. And I got really good at that. I shouldn't have, but I got really good at that. And I also got really good at sensing when a car is running hot and kind of managing it, trying to min-max airflow, min-max my throttle input to keep the car happy. And I think it's that prior history, as soon as the Warmaster started to get hot, that part of my brain kicked on and said, okay, let's figure out how to make this thing not overheat. Let's try to figure out how to keep it alive. Not thinking, all right, who cares if it overheats? We got plenty of water. Throw more water in it, remove the grill, remove the hood, hell, whatever you need to do, keep it cool. No, my brain went, all right, let's make it manage that temperature. And I think right after that moment, I just kind of went into a preservation of, let's just run this car and preserve it. And it, Jeep coming up, I just went into this kind of preservation of trying to save the car. And I think that worked. I think in the end, like I said, I felt like I failed with what I intended to do. But reflecting on it, maybe that's not a bad thing. I think if I was to ask the other drivers of the car, they would say that it's probably best that we didn't run it to the ground and go as hard as we can, because I think they enjoy just running the car and having a good time. And maybe we're sure we weren't beating on the car and killing it and then fixing it, but we were having fun. And I think we probably got more fun out of the car running a full 24 hours, getting more seat time in it, and allowing people to drive it and have a good time in it. I think that kind of worked out for the best. But it still gets me to this point where I'm still not 100% satisfied with how we performed. I wanted to do better. I wanted to do, like, not so much better as in placement. I didn't want to place higher. I wanted to have more enjoyment out of the car. It felt like I got way too serious. And I felt like I lost a lot of what made me enjoy the race last year, where I wasn't running my own car. I lost that kind of just getting lost in the moment of, I'm at a racetrack racing on with a bunch of other cars and sitting back and enjoying being with my friends, talking with them, and having a good time. I was constantly thinking of what I need to do next. What's the next step of what I need to do? How are our tires? How's our gas? That kind of stuff. Speaking of gas, that was one thing that also, like, I was not prepared for in kind of trying to run my own team, and as well as gas I kind of covered for all the teams. What I ended up doing is I got to use oil drums, 55-gallon oil drums, and cleaned them out with some gasoline, and figured I'd use them. And I figured 110 gallons of fuel, that should be more than enough for our 3 cars, because we had the Accord from last year, the Civic, and the Warmaster. I was like, 110 gallons should be enough. And then what I didn't account for when I thought that was when we did it, and I was kind of running my mental calculations of how much we would need, I was basing my calculations off of one car, a Honda Accord, which is pretty fuel efficient to begin with. But not only that, it was halfway through the race with the Accord, because we were running low on tires, we started to baby that car. We were barely pushing it. You were coasting a lot, and you weren't running up to high speeds. So we were barely using fuel for half of the race because we were trying to preserve our tires. I completely forgot to account for that. Got distracted. There was the Sierra Blue Renegade, the one I wanted, that went by. It's a light blue. Anyway, I really forgot to factor that into my calculations, and I realized that when we were on the way to the track. We were driving out there, and I had a lot of time to think, kind of reflect on everything. I realized, holy crap, we're going to be short by like 20, 30 gallons. There's no way we're gonna have enough. And little did I know, that was wrong too. We went through so much gas, so much faster than I was expecting. We ended up blowing through both 55-gallon drums within half of the race. And luckily, it wasn't actually all of it. We left like 10 gallons in the bottom because the pump wasn't adjusted right. But we blew through that gas way faster than I was even expecting. And then I had brought extra cash, so I go, all right, we'll fill one of the drums back up. We filled that back up, and then before we knew it, that was gone. So it's like, crap, we just blew through all of that. Now we're trying to scrounge all our money together, because I used all my cash to fill the drum back up. And now we're gonna go 5-gallon jug at a time at the gas at the track. So then we just started filling 5-gallon jugs one at a time. And it was just insane how much fuel we went through, and how I went from, oh, this will be absolutely more than enough fuel for the race, to we weren't even remotely close to enough. It was just the things that kind of I didn't account for from the first year, because the first year I just showed up and drove. I showed up the day before the race, helped out with decorating the cars, and then drove. There was no stress. Well, other than trying to fix the brake line before the race started. But there was practically no stress for me. One of the other things that I kind of found out this year that I wasn't really ready for was the physical strain. I didn't even have the inkling of forethought of how physically draining the race was going to be on me. I remembered getting tired from the first one, but that was mental. It was from the mental stimulation of all the avoiding all the cars, running on a track, but it didn't seem that bad. This year, doing 2 cars was completely different. It took a whole new level of physical strain on me. It really wore me out, and it really wore me out much faster than I was expecting. It was the fact that I was driving the Roadmaster, running pits for the Roadmaster, the Civic, and even trying to help with the Accord, because I I feel like I need to do that kind of stuff. I don't have to, but my brain just feels like I gotta do, like I have to keep moving. I'm not happy if I'm sitting still when there's tasks that I could be doing. If there's something I could be doing, I want to be doing it. So I was running, helping do pits for every car when I was available, and then I was driving 2 cars. And the just absolute physical toll that had on me, like by halfway through the race, I got to the point where I was like, I can't drive the Roadmaster or the Warmaster anymore. I can't. I need to take a break because I hurt everywhere. I can barely like focus on things, like trying to put lug nuts. I was struggling to put the lug nuts on. It was getting to be like physically difficult to do tasks. So I actually had to like stop driving for a good 3-4 hours and like do nothing, no driving or anything, and calm down, because it was just, I was beat and I was just not physically fit enough to be doing that. And I think that's something I'm going to have to work on if I want to do this again next year, is I need to make sure I'm in much better physical shape. Like I'm not seriously out of shape or anything, but I'm very out of shape is, I guess, the best way to put it. I'm very skinny. I don't have very much muscle, so trying to do stuff like hold yourself in place when driving the cars, it's a lot on the body, and especially for someone like me who has 0 core muscles. It's just, there's nothing down here, no muscles. And when you're going around a track, it may not seem like it, but when you're going around a track, even in something as mundane as a Civic, you have these incredible forces pulling you to the outside of the car. I think the best way I can put it is, if you ever, like when you're driving your car and you get on a off-ramp or an on-ramp for that matter, and you drive too fast through it, like you kind of not paying attention and you're driving too fast through it, and you're like, have to physically grip the wheel harder and hold yourself in place. It's like that, but twice the force, and for hours, like for an hour straight.
There's a speed trap ahead.
Yes, there is. There's a cop. I see him. So it's a lot. It's a lot for someone that doesn't. Oh, they must be really trying to get people, because there's another one up ahead. But yeah, it's a lot to put on your body, and I was not prepared for that. And I think one of the other things that probably played a huge role in how physically tiring it was for me is I didn't sleep very well. And by not sleeping very well, I mean I didn't sleep. Like, no sleep. The days prior to the race, I got maybe 2 hours of sleep. The day before the race, I got 0 sleep. Did not sleep at all. I just sat in bed, stressed out, thinking of all the things that could possibly go wrong with the car, and didn't sleep. I tried. I did everything I could think of. I put music on. I tried watching videos. Nothing worked. I just couldn't sleep. I was too stressed, thinking of all the things that could screw me over in the race, all the things that how it could ruin my weekend, things I shouldn't be worried about, but things that I thought, like, my brain couldn't shut off. So I didn't sleep, and it was probably a big contributor to why I was so tired and so beat from this. I was running on empty to start with, and then I was pushing my body through a lot. And I think that is one of those things that makes running my own car difficult is just I stress myself out so much with all this mundane crap I shouldn't be worried about, but I can't shut off. And it's just a lot to take in. And I think because of all that, I don't think I enjoyed this year as much as I did the first year. I still think that first year was my best vacation I've ever had. I thought having the extra cars and having more of my friends around would make this year that much better, but it actually made it worse to an extent for me because my brain was in work mode essentially. Like I was focused on, or not, maybe not focused on is the right word, hitting traffic. I was kind of stuck in my brain, essentially, thinking of all the things that can go wrong, all the things I needed to do, trying to make sure that the people that were, in my mind, relying on me, the people that were driving all this way to drive the car, weren't going to be disappointed. And all of that combined, like, it took me out of the kind of enjoying the moment, enjoying being around friends, enjoying just being on the track as much. Don't get me wrong, I still had an absolute blast driving around the track, interacting with the live stream, doing that kind of stuff, working on the cars, doing the pit crew stuff. I love doing that. Don't get me wrong, I love it. Like I wouldn't do it and hurt myself so much if I didn't enjoy it. But I was so focused, like so honed in on that, I didn't get that moment like I did the first year where I kind of just took in like what we were doing. Like really thought about and kind of sat back and relaxed and said, holy crap, I'm racing a car in an actual race with my friends that I met online doing online racing. Like, I had that kind of moment of, holy crap, we're doing this. This year I didn't really have that moment. Like, it never really sunk in. And maybe it's because that was something I get with the first time we did it. Maybe it's because we were doing it a second time. We had already done it. Maybe that's why I didn't quite get that same moment of, holy crap, what we're doing right now is incredible. And it never really felt like that to me. And I think that kind of made me feel like this one wasn't quite as good, even though I was surrounded by more of my friends and we accomplished arguably so much more this year. We had not one, but 3 cars that we ran make it a full 24 hours around the track. And it wasn't like a cakewalk. We had our moments, we had our crashes, we had our little dramas that popped up, but we pushed through them all and we finished. And it's what we did was incredible. It didn't feel as much of an accomplishment to me. And I don't know why. Like, it just felt like this year wasn't quite the same to me. And I feel like a lot of that has to do with the fact that I was building a car and running a car. I feel like that had a lot to do with it. I guess the one thing I don't know, and I kind of been thinking about, and as the deciding factor of whether, and something that's kind of driving me to want to get another car for next year, and have had me actively looking already for another car, was the fact that while maybe I didn't quite get that same feeling that I did the first year, and didn't really have as great of a vacation as the first year, I feel like overall it was a better experience for everyone else. Like, I think overall everyone that was there was more enjoyment out of it from the group, because we had a larger group this time. If we only ran one car, like, there'd be no, like, ZK and Banca maybe would come out and spectate, but not be involved with driving. Like, that adds that extra layer. And my dad, who came out and ran the car as well, I think he got a much better understanding of why I do all the online racing that I do, and maybe even a tiny bit realize why I spend so much damn time on the computer talking with these friends that aren't actually there. I think he got the tiniest inkling of why I do that, and maybe got a little bit of insight. But I think that is what's kind of driving me to get a car for next year. But I think with that kind of wraps up my thoughts for the most part of how this grocery getter went for 2019. I gotta say thank you, a huge thank you to Jim's family, Cammie, Nick, Kurt, and Brian, every one of his family members that helped get the other two cars ready and were so nice to us, and offered so much hospitality to us. They were beyond kind, and it was extremely relaxing having a place to work on the cars, and knowing that the other cars were in good hands, and I didn't have to do anything with them. I didn't have to work with them folding a brake line underneath the car minutes before we have to be on track. It was nice that I didn't have to think anything about the other cars, because I was already stressing myself out enough about getting my own car ready. So that was huge, and I really appreciate them, because the trip would have been probably too much for me if it wasn't for them. It would have been, I probably would have been overwhelmed and probably had a bad time. I don't think I would have enjoyed it at all if it wasn't for the efforts that they put in. And the other huge thank you is Magnet, who built the 2 Raspberry Pis that we used for live streaming the race, and did all of the work with Cone and Moose and setting everything up. And I wouldn't be surprised if Magnet put more work into the race than any of us, as far as hours of work and getting everything ready. I'm pretty sure he put more work in than any of us. He was constantly working, testing it, working out flaws, fixing those. It was truly incredible what he accomplished in the middle of nowhere, Indiana, to live stream 2 cars going around a track for 24 hours with minimal hiccups. What he accomplished with that is truly incredible. There is probably multi-million-dollar functions with professional racing series that have more dropouts and more issues than we did. It was incredible what he accomplished, and I gotta thank him for all the work he put in, because it didn't go